Tell us a little about yourself and what motivated you to run for office.
Well, I've been in Lee Summit for over 25 years. I came here in 1993 from Gladstone, Missouri, where I was the city attorney, in-house city attorney there, and then took the position of the in-house city attorney here in 93 and spent the 90s in that position. When I went to the private sector from that position, my husband and I made the decision to go ahead and make our home here in Lee Summit. I was here, we had a residency requirement as an employee, so that's the reason I kind of got here. And then when we had the choice to stay or move wherever we wanted, we decided to stay. From that time on, I've always been very active in the communities in which I live. I was kind of raised that way, and my family has always been that way. So I continued working on volunteer things throughout the community, including running for council in 2002, and I was held a 4-year term, 2002 to 2006, on council. Then moved on to working with the LSEDC and all those kind of things. So a couple years ago, I was approached to kind of get involved with the school district and what was going on, and I'm one, if you know me, to take a pretty deep dive when I decide to get passionate about something, and I did that. And I've really enjoyed the information that I've found. I really appreciate the challenges that public education has these days, and we're not unique. I'm found in all the research I've done, and I particularly am enjoying being a part of the real-world learning secondary expansion team over the last year. That's the group that's working with the Kauffman Foundation grant to kind of figure out what are we going to do with these high school age students and how are we going to get them workforce ready, which doves directly into all the LSEDC economic development stuff that we've been talking about for years now here in Lee Summit. So it all just kind of fell together. I've always, in my time, tried to be active in at least three organizations. I asked my girlfriend a long time ago, who's another professional, how, you get asked all the time, how do you cut it off? And so she said, well, I always try to stay just 3. So I've done that, and then over the last couple years, I've finished my roles on different ones, and I found I had time. And I've always had about 10 to 15 hours a week that ends up going to something community focused. And so the timing was great, and I really think that my leadership skills could really lend themselves to being useful as a member of the Board of Education.
All right. What experiences have helped you prepare for the professionalism and leadership required of school board members?
Well, I actually, in my career, I was kind of thinking about this, anticipating, what are my qualifications. I have attended in a variety of leadership roles, representing clients as well, in probably over 1,000 public meetings. That means on an agenda in front of a city council, preparing an agenda for a community improvement district agenda. Going to school board meetings. I've attended at least 10 of those in the last year. So I've in my lifetime, in my professional life, I have probably attended over 1,000 meetings. In that, I've learned and watched what to do and not to do. I also, in my role as a city attorney, and I'm always a city attorney somewhere, I have development clients and city clients, I also always advise and work with them and do orientations that talk about decorum and how to conduct meetings, parliamentary procedure, all those kind of things. So I actually kind of instruct on those things, and so I think that all of that experience is going to help me be able to contribute.
Good. How does our district maintain and continue to improve its services and reputation?
Well, I think my platform, if you will, that I'm looking towards articulating. It has to do with three things: curriculum, culture, and capital improvements. And I think that what we've seen is curriculum is an issue for not only our school district, but many school districts. And I think that we need to focus very directly on curriculum. And what I mean by that is we need to focus very directly on some assistance in the classroom. We need some human resources. And I'd like to see the teachers get some assistance in the classroom. I think pre-K is critical. We've got to be, I think it's an exciting time because I think we could be like the school district that says pre-K is our priority. Every one of our children are to come to kindergarten knowing their ABCs and learning ready. And if they aren't when they get to us, then we're going to make sure they get there as fast as possible. We're going to try to begin hitting this achievement gap from day one when the students come to kindergarten. And then the other thing I think is important is culture. That means a culture of respect, integrity, and compassion, that we meet everyone where they are, and we make sure that we are treating each other as well as students, and this is student to student, this is student to teacher, this is teacher to student, this is teacher to administrator. We need to develop a culture of respect and integrity and compassion. And we also want to make sure that we have safety and we have security, which leads into really naturally into capital improvements. Capital improvements are important because we need to have facilities, and I think that we also need to develop some credibility and financial credibility. If someone were to tell me if I could wave a magic wand and do a couple things, one of them would be to reestablish financial credibility for our school district with our constituents. Once you establish credibility, then you can establish a work plan or going forward plan on how we deal with the curriculum issues. And if there's a dollar price tag that goes with that, we'll be able to articulate that with credibility. And then thirdly, as far as capital improvements are concerned, I have been counsel and involved in over $1 billion in bond financing transactions in my career. And I think that there's ways in which we need to look seriously at all these transactions. The opinion of probable cost, the OPCs, when they come across, they aren't just signed off on. I mean, there are ways in which dollars and cents need to be managed as closely as possible, because that's how you demonstrate responsibility, and that's how we build back our financial credibility with our constituents. So that's kind of the way I would approach it.
Okay. The R7 district bylaws clearly define the relationship between the school board and R7 staff. Please describe how you envision your working relationship with staff.
Well, having worked in the city managing form of government on many levels, I think that it is always important to understand that the superintendent is the CEO and actually the CAO of the school district, and to have conversations beyond informative conversations with other folks that are under his direction is not really appropriate, at least not without some kind of protocols in place. That would be inviting them to the meeting. If we're talking about an administrative level, that would be inviting him, letting him know that meeting might take place. But I also think it's important for people to share information. It's incumbent upon us as elected officials to be responsible with that information and respectful of the chain of command. So that would be the way I would deal with that kind of thing. I think you have to respect the role of the CEO. You have to give, but I think it's also the job of the Board of Education to provide the policy direction and be very involved in that policy direction about what we want. For instance, an example of that is we set the policy that all of our kids are going to be pre-K and kindergarten ready. The board says, make it so. And that superintendent, that's the policy to make it so. And then it's our job to keep that person accountable in the performance of that policy implementation.
Okay. Please summarize your qualifications and level of financial expertise appropriate to govern an approximate $300 million school district budget.
Well, on the simplest level, I own my own business now. I come from an entrepreneurial family, so on the simplest level, the dollar and cents are the dollar and cents. A ledger book is a ledger book. It's just a lot more zeros. When I was on the city council in Lee Summit, we had a $70 million general fund budget, and probably all funds in, we were probably at $170 million when I was on the city council, and so I was involved in the budget process in that role. So I'm pretty comfortable with those numbers. I also, on the development side of work, I have been involved in projects regularly, routinely. The projects I work on are $20 million projects, and then I have special projects that go in excess of $200 million. So I'm very familiar with that value, and that I'm familiar in the value that I know what those dollars mean. I understand them. They're not unfamiliar.
What is your approach to conflict resolution among board members?
Well, I think that, again, we've got to create a culture of respect and integrity, and that means that we have to be forthright with each other about what is going on. I got you moments are a waste of everyone's time, and it certainly doesn't serve the purpose. I think we've got, over the last 5 years, we've watched, I think, our school district move away from the public education purpose that we serve. Public education is one of the hallmarks of our democracy, and it is our duty to educate and everyone. And now, in this generation, it's our duty from an economic development standpoint to get students workforce ready. So not only are we educating just because public education is critical to our democracy, we're now educating because we need to help our students be able to function and live and have the quality of life in employment.
Okay. Please describe a group deliberation experience in which you held a minority opinion but were ultimately successful in reaching a consensus.
Well, I have a very specific example. I look at Mr. Williams here because he was on the council at the time. This kind of gives you an example of the deeper dive I always end up taking, but when I first got on the city council, we had a proposal for we had an RFP out for the second and Independence, where the Gamber Center is now. There was a proposal on the table, and we were seeking an RFP for multifamily development on that corner. And so, not a huge fan myself, and I had just gotten elected. But then my husband also, who is a landscape architect, was having his international conference. So I went to the international conference, and I always get a badge because I like to go to sessions. And I went to a session at his landscape architecture national conference and learned about downtown master planning. And so I came back and I brought that concept back and said, hey guys, why don't we think about rejecting all of these proposals that we've received, and let's step back and let's master plan and see what really might be best for that spot, because at this point we didn't have a downtown master plan. And so I just kind of planted the seed, and lo and behold, I got everybody to agree that we should reject those RFPs and try and do a downtown development, a master plan. And in the end, the result was the Gamber Center, essentially, because the thought process changed. So I think that was one of my, you don't have many opportunities that in life, and that was one of my most prideful opportunities to change people's minds.
Good. Please explain the roles of district leadership, superintendent, and school board with respect to the broader community?
I think that that it's important for the superintendent to be part of the community and I think it's important for the community to know him, especially community leaders, to know him enough to value him. If we are going to start recreating a trust relationship between the constituents and the school district, it's not just the board. It's going to be administration too, because again, we're the policymakers, so we are expected, we'll do our homework, but we're also going to expect our professional staff to bring forward these ideas that are going to move us forward. And if we can't, if our superintendent is aloof, it's not connecting, it's not being able to carry a message, that's not going to help us in developing our credibility. So I think it's going to be key on that position to do that. As far as other administrative staff's involvement, I honestly, other than in their roles in positions and subject matter expertise, I think that there's probably communication that maybe occurs with that. But in my mind, it's really incumbent upon the superintendent to carry that role.
Current data provided by our school district shows certain subsets of students are underperforming in math, science, and other categories. How do you interpret this data and propose the LSR7 board address it?
Well, I honestly was involved with the Community Solutions Focus Group that had folks on retired faculty, on teachers, R7, on our group that analyzed that data. And in fact, on March 1st of last 2019, it must have been 2019, we actually made a presentation on that. And I think that, and then most recently in September of 2019, there's a new study that's been out from Stanford that talks about the fact that in fact, it's not necessarily our population subgroups that is driving this issue, it's more a poverty issue that's driving this issue, which I was happy to see that report come out because that's consistent with what our group was trying to inform on in May of 2019. So I think that, to me, it's all about being able to get get the kind of services our pre-K kids need, so we can get them ready, and then it's all about getting help in the classrooms to be able to move our kids who aren't achieving forward. And that means students, excuse me. That means that when you have a teacher in a classroom with 25 students, 10 of which are on an IEP, and that teacher is supposed to teach a subject that is going to move the class to the next level on something, she or he is going to have to, I think it's almost impossible. I just can't imagine having to move a whole class forward and then have to have that individual time to make sure that your kids that need some extra attention, they also have to do that. And then you don't even address the kids, the gifted kids. I mean, I've heard the stories of the fact that when some of our students reach kindergarten, 50% of the class knows their ABCs and 50% of the class doesn't. And your teacher is there in the middle and does the best that they can. And I think that we can improve that. And if we improve it at that level and we improve it throughout the elementary school levels, I think that we could be, again, one of the first school districts to actually have a plan about how we're going to move this forward that doesn't exist on the basis of a label. It exists on the basis of that we have a child, a student here, a person who needs help in this area, and that's the help they're going to get. that's how I think that's how I feel about the subgrouping. I think that the labels have stood in our way, quite frankly.
Okay. What do you consider major challenges and priorities for the district, and how will you address?
Well, I think I named the three that I think are important, and that is we need to establish financial credibility with our constituents. We need to identify what our teachers need to address the achievement gap and to set a different culture as it relates to achievement. I think that it is critical for us to get this secondary education expansion going. I mean, we look at this bond issue, and we see these buildings, and we think, oh, okay, this is good. Maybe this will help. We can, support the education process better. It's going to be 3 years before the buildings are completed. That's 3 more graduation classes. That's 3 more new kindergarten classes. So I think we're going to have to figure out a way not to wait and to start acting. It just feels like we haven't acted on just critical surgical points that could improve what we got going in our school district for the last 5 years. We've had so much going on that we've kind of lost sight of the public education goal.
What do you believe should be a primary focus of the school board and your role as a board member?
Well, I think initially, we should make a significant effort to empower our new superintendent to be progressive, make some hard decisions, and get the framework in place to deal with the issues that I've previously talked about. I also think that we as a board need to work with and develop a way of working together that calls upon strengths. And I can use another example. When I was on the city council, one of my fellow city council members and I didn't communicate. I mean, he drove me crazy. He would say something, and it didn't work for his style of communication didn't work with my style of communication. And fortunately, one of our fellow council members brought us together, took us to lunch, and said, "You two need to figure it out." And what we figured out was, what I figured out and what I shared was, I don't do biting sarcasm. I think that I just want to have a conversation about, I want to have a more sophisticated conversation about a subject matter, and I don't like quipping and doing, I just don't find that useful. And he was really good at it, and so the minute he would do that, I would just shut down. I would not participate. And so the energy of us together wasn't happening. So when he understood that, and then I understood that I gotta get a little thicker skin about some of the stuff he was doing, then we got together and we ended up working great together for the rest of our 4 years together. So you got to find a way to respect. He respected my sensitivity, and I respected his need to kind of be snarky sometimes.
What is your long-term vision for the district?
To be the best. I want to lead on all these issues we talked about. I want us to be stellar in our pre-K. I want our secondary education folks out there and working and low amounts of debt. I just want us to be the shining star. And we have been in the past, and I think that we can get there again. That's what I want. I think that would be awesome for everyone. It would be awesome for the students, awesome for our community, awesome for economic development. It would just be a great thing.
Okay. Well, Christine, we got a little bit. Is there anything else you want to tell us? Anything we didn't cover? Anything question we asked that you want to add to?
I do want to make one comment, and you didn't ask me this question, and since this is going to be on video and everyone's going to get to watch it, and I want to be the first to ring the bell. I have a son who is 12 years old who is not a student of the R7 school district. My son is at Our Lady of the Presentation in Lee Summit. That is a faith decision to send him to that school, and I'm very proud of him and his accomplishments there. Some may think that for some reason, because I have a son, I don't have a child in the school system, that I can't serve on the Board of Education. And I think that if I were to use my experience with my son as my only measure of what education is, then I think that would be very limited. And I think that for us to say that there's a criteria, a demographic that you have to be able to serve, and that demographic needs to be that you have a student in the system. I really don't think that's that. I think that's limiting, and I really think I would be a good leader, besides the fact that my son happens to go to a school of our faith. That said, I am a graduate of Oak Park High School in North Kansas City School District. I am a graduate of the University of Missouri Kansas City undergraduate, and a graduate of the University of Missouri Kansas City Law School. I have, as I've said before, and I can't emphasize it enough, as a political science major, I'm all over it. I think that public education is a hallmark of our democracy, and it has to succeed.